What's happening, everybody? On today's show, the latest college football playoff rankings are out. Could the SEC get two teams in the playoff again? Not likely, but we'll discuss. Also, it's rivalry week in the SEC. Try saying that real fast. We'll preview week 13 with Chris Marler. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Today's episode is brought to you by Priz Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use our code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy at Priz Picks. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. As we do every week, we welcome in our buddy Chris Marler from the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. And Marler, it is upon us, the last week of college football. This kind of sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. I'm really excited for rivalry week. It's always a fun one, but yeah, that part, let's say blows. I just did, so it blows. I don't like it.
Well, we want to react. We just saw last night the latest college football playoff rankings, and a little bit of a change up top is still Georgia stays at number 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3. Washington moves up a spot. They jump ahead of FSU. Florida State slides down to 5, and then everything else kind of stayed the same. Oregon 6, Texas 7, Bama 8, Missouri 9, and then the other SEC teams in there. Ole Miss at 12, LSU 15, and Tennessee 21. I guess just first initial reaction to Washington sliding up a spot. They did have a nice win over Oregon State, but man, it feels like Florida State moving down feels like it's a reaction to Jordan Travis getting hurt and out for the year.
Yeah, and they did a good job of at least pretending that it's not, right? Like they brought up the fact that was like, well, he also, sorry, I'm just gonna tell you right now, I have cut or burnt my lip or my tongue, and I have after 3 minutes of talking, I have a lisp, and I feel like Lou Holtz, and every time I try to say Mississippi State, it's like a massive uphill battle. So
I had a hard time with rivalry week. Welcome in.
Week. So I think that they did a really good job of at least pretending like that's not what the criteria was. I think that when you look at Washington, they really do have a good resume. I love the fact they brought up they haven't had a 10-plus point win in I think it's since mid-September, which is crazy. But they've played 4 teams that were ranked at the time and obviously won every game they've played. They've beaten Oregon at home. They've beaten Oregon State on the road. Those are 2 legitimate top 15 teams. And I was impressed with the way they beat Oregon State because they beat Oregon State without scoring a single point in the second half. The defense stepped up, and I think it's fun at this point because we still haven't had a crazy weekend. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Shocking to me the lack of movement we've seen in the first couple weeks, especially in the beginning of the year when we all kind of thought it was oh man, it's gonna be one of those crazy 2007 type years, and now you're looking at the top 10 just seems seemingly unchanged, with the top 8 especially for the past several weeks. I think this might have been a reaction to FSU and Jordan Travis, but I will also tell you that it's not. They have a leg to stand on here in the argument because Florida State, if everyone is still undefeated and you're looking at Florida State's resume and Washington's resume top to bottom is more impressive. They might not have in some people's eyes as impressive of a top win, but they do. They beat Oregon, right? I know that Florida State destroyed LSU in week 1, but outside of them and then Clemson now moving back into the rankings, they don't have any currently ranked opponents they've beaten. And what's been kind of a weak schedule throughout the year.
Yeah, it's let's kind of play this out. We'll circle back and come back to the SEC. The Big Ten seems pretty simple, right? Michigan and Ohio State play each other this weekend. They're both undefeated. The winner of that game will go to the Big Ten title game, likely to play Iowa. Sorry, Iowa, great defense. They have no chance against either Michigan or Ohio State.
They moved down after a win. They're 9-2. They moved down.
So all that to say, whoever wins this game this weekend is in. basically. They'll still have to win the Big Ten title game. We get it, but we'll just say that team is in, right? No matter what.
Right.
Okay. Next, we have the Pac-12 champ, and obviously this is still, this still has to play itself out. It's setting up right now that it could be Washington, Oregon, but somebody said if Oregon were to slip up against Oregon State and Arizona wins, we could get Washington, Arizona in the Pac-12 title game. So that would be nuts. So, but let's just assume both teams take care of business this weekend, and we get a Washington, Oregon rematch in the Pac-12 title game. I think that one's simple. Washington wins, they're in, right?
Right.
They're undefeated. If Oregon wins, they avenge their one loss on the year. But as they sit at number 6, is it kind of hard? Washington would move down, obviously, but would you have Oregon above an undefeated Florida State ACC champ?
No. And here's the thing. I would think, if I'm being honest, I would watch those two teams, and I think that even maybe with Jordan Travis, that Oregon is a better team. But we have to take this into account, and I feel like they've been saying it a lot, but they've been saying it about the wrong teams. They've been saying about Bama and Texas. The results on the field have to matter. If you want to see these big-time matchups, if we want to see, like, Bama, Texas, LSU, Florida State, we want to see these big-time early matchups, you cannot as a committee say, but at the end of the year, I know they had one loss and the other team was undefeated, but this team looked better, right? Like, right. The on-field results have to matter. That's why Texas should go over Bama if they're both 12-1. And here's the thing too, that like I'm surprised we haven't heard mentioned yet, but it's because it's like I think very, very relevant here. Florida State, it sucks with Jordan Travis being out, and they still, the hay's not in the barn with them. They got a 5-6 Florida team. They're only a touchdown favorite and on the road. Then they got to play a top 10 team in the ACC championship game. I think people kind of expect that they're going to lose one, but they don't. They deserve to be in, regardless of Jordan Travis. And if you disagree with that, let me take you back to the 2014 College Football Playoff, the very first one, and one of the most incredible stories that we don't talk enough about in college football history, which is Ohio State going into a playoff and in the postseason with a Big 12 or Big 10 championship and then the 2 playoff games and winning it all with a third-string quarterback. You cannot take away the 84, like the hopes of 84 scholarship kids because the other one that's left is now injured and out for the season.
Texas plays Texas Tech this week. Brett Yormark would love nothing more than to pull off the upset, like he said, preseason. But let's just say Texas wins that one. Their opponent still has to be figured out. Oklahoma State plays BYU. If they lose that one and Oklahoma wins, we could get a rematch between Texas and Oklahoma. It's a crazy situation, but that would work in Texas's favor because Oklahoma's number 13 right now. They could move up a spot. You're talking about Texas maybe playing the number 12 team in their Big 12 title game. You're talking about Florida State playing the number 10 team in Louisville in the ACC title game. Like, these are all huge opponents, whereas Michigan, Ohio State's going to play Iowa. And then again, we'll see what happens with the Pac-12. But I wanted to get to the SEC here because we know it's simple. Georgia wins, they're in. Everyone wants to talk about this scenario that what if Alabama were to pull off the upset over Georgia? And I think part of it is, what does it look like? Bama wins on a last-second field goal or an overtime. I think the committee could be looking at both those teams and saying Georgia and Alabama both look sexy. But I think you're right. Joey Galloway just said on the selection show that he thinks Alabama is in over Texas if it were to come down to it. But I think what you said is right. Like, why are we going to ignore the regular season? Galloway's like, well, Alabama's a much different team now. Okay, great. Sure. But what did that matchup mean earlier in the year? It just doesn't mean anything? Like, let's just skip over it, act like it didn't happen? Like, it's got to mean something.
So here's the thing. Like, I am a diehard Alabama fan. I grew up in an Alabama household. We had season tickets. I've been a Bama fan my whole life. But objectively speaking, for the good of the sport, for the future of the sport, and this is something, I'm going to get on a soapbox here for a second. This is something the NCAA has done everything in their power to just ruin over the last couple of years and mishandle and fumble the bag on like every single possible opportunity of like actually providing for the student athlete. Look at James Madison. You look what they did with Tez Walker for most of the season. You look what they've done like with Mizzou getting suspended a couple of years ago, like all that kind of stuff. This is like the NIL stuff, like all of it. They've never been in the best interest for the student athlete, but we've like trustingly put this thing that we all love in the hands of other people that don't always act in the best interest for the fans. For the good of the sport, you have to put in Texas over Bama. And here's the other part of it too, man. They deserve to be in over Bama because it's not like they got Bama at home early and and it was a crazy fluke game. Bama gave up 21 points. Bama had a lead going into the fourth quarter. You don't get to I would hate for a 12-1 Bama that beats the two-time defending national champion. Like, I would hate to have to argue that they shouldn't be in over 12-1 Texas, because at this point of the season, that's very difficult to do. I think from from a non-biased standpoint for me. But I will tell you that you can't sit there because of what's going to end up happening the rest of the college football moving forward, especially when you have these 9-game conference schedules that are becoming from all the different Power 5 conferences. You can't look at them and be why would you schedule out an out of conference Power 5 game, a marquee matchup? Why? We saw when it happened in Texas. It doesn't matter. If that was the case, they should just play Louisiana Monroe, or I would say New Mexico State, but some people that's probably still a pretty sore subject. So I will also say this too, Gordy. I said this earlier today with Crane & Co. And I was like, I'll tell you right now, when I'm sober, before Thanksgiving, and before there's any chance of it happening with Alabama, with Bama, Georgia, Texas deserves to be in over Alabama. If you catch me in the window of time, if Bama wins that game from 8 p.m. December 2nd to 12 noon December 3rd, I will guarantee you I will be saying something very different.
Yeah, a week and a half from now, you're going to be like, Bama deserves to be in. They're the
Delete
best.
all the content. Delete all the content, Gordy.
I will say, though, if Bama wins, say, 35-17, how do you not put – if they blow out Georgia,
you'll hate it.
You have to put them in. There's no denying it. But there is a world. It's not likely, but there is a world where Georgia and Bama could get in. But we would need upset craziness on conference championship weekend, and a lot would have to happen. But it's not out of the realm. All right. More with Chris Marler here coming up on Locked On SEC in just a sec. I want to remind you guys about our friends over at Priz Picks. Priz Picks, they are the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It is just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Of course, basketball season is here. You could do a cross-combo projections from football and basketball. You like LeBron over the 3-pointers made. You like, Travis Kelce over the receptions. You could do a combo total with both of them, and that will get you the over on, say, 10.5. It is so easy to do. Prize Picks, they even offer the reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If they exit in the first half, don't come back in the second half, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Got some buddies at work. They started doing it. They are absolutely loving it. You will too. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege and check out Prize Picks. It is daily fantasy sports made easy. And we continue on with our buddy Chris Marler from the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. And Marler, we got to get into it because we got so many games happening this weekend. Quick reminder to our listeners, thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And shout out to our everydayers. Keep on coming back and checking us out. We'll be getting you ready for the Egg Bowl on Thursday night. And Marler, that's where I want to start. Thanksgiving night on ESPN. It is number 12 Ole Miss at 5-6 Mississippi State. I'm wearing an Ole Miss t-shirt. I just like the shirt. I'm not necessarily an Ole Miss fan, but nonetheless, Marler, this line opened at around 13.5, and it has come down to Ole Miss -10. Money is coming in on Mississippi State. 1, it's in Starkville. 2, Will Rogers came back last week, looked pretty good. 2, Lou Griffin had a touchdown. Woody Marks had a touchdown. Mississippi State's got the ammo now. They're healthy. They could give Ole Miss a game.
Yeah. They could. I mean, I think the thing for me that is the most concerning if you're Ole Miss is the line, for one, because Vegas always does something. And this game is always a good game, right? It feels like over the last decade at least, and I could be wrong. I'm probably missing at least one game that's kind of crazy. But I feel like for the most part, this has been a really, really good hard-fought matchup. Or if it's not a close game, it's the team that should have won didn't, for what Ole Miss last year, to be honest, right? Ole Miss is averaging 21 points less per game on the road than they are at home. That I think is concerning if you're Ole Miss. But man, one thing I really enjoyed seeing last week in that game, because I know it's I know they're playing Louisiana, whatever, But like the second half adjustments that they made at halftime, especially on defense and on offense, I think they outscored them like 28-0 in the second half. That was a very, very good sign, I think, for this team. I'm not a believer in Mississippi State. I'm not. I love Will Rogers, and I think he's been a phenomenal. He's had a phenomenal career there. I'm just not sold on this team. And I think that this is also a situation where you're gonna love to see like Lane Kiffin really, like Lane Kiffin has a chance to do something he's never done, which is like follow through with all the trash talk that he's had, like, kind of throughout the season, where you finish the 10-win season, your only 2 losses are to Bama and Georgia. That's huge.
You mentioned this one being close. 5 of the last 6 have been decided by 1 score or less. And
Crazy.
I love the defensive linebackers for Mississippi State, Bookie Watson and Jet Johnson. Jet Johnson led the SEC in tackles a year ago, Marler. He's got a chance to do it again. He is number 1 in tackles right now. Bookie Watson's right behind him. So, like, does Bookie let up and let Jet get a tackle? Like, if they're tied on Thursday night, does he let off? Let him. He would be the first guy in the SEC to lead the conference in tackles back-to-back seasons since Danny Trevathan over a decade ago at Kentucky. So
Who was before that? I think it was Patrick Willis before that, right?
Before that, it was Colonel Wiggins back in 1924. So,
real?
No.
Okay.
How about on Friday on CBS? It is number 9 Missouri at 4-7 Arkansas. Mizzou about a 7.5-point favorite on the road, but Sam Pittman, nothing to lose here. He's already safe. So, all the fear in like coaching scared because your job's on the line, all this, he's coming back. But Eli Drinkwitz and company, a chance to get to 10 wins.
I'm terrified of this line because I thought the 10 was way too low, and it's gone down to 7.5. Mizzou's going to be without a couple of starters. I think at 4 total as of right now, including 2 linebackers. So that's a little bit concerning. I do like Mizzou in this one. I know they kind of struggled last week. Huge emotional win the week before. Who we call it against Tennessee, and then you kind of like sputter against Florida, and you don't look great on defense and all that kind of stuff. Arkansas just does not have the offense, in my opinion, to hang with them. They also, like, if you look at the numbers, man, Eli Drinkwitz, one of the first things he brought up when he was at media days, and I was dying laughing when he said it because he was like, because people just don't take Mizzou that seriously, and he's like, you want to look at the numbers here. We're hoping that we don't lose a lot of those rivalries we have, like especially the Arkansas game, because we own Arkansas. I didn't say we own Arkansas, but they have owned Arkansas in this rivalry. I think they've won like 6 of the last 7 or something like that, or 6 of 8.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one. Can I just say for the record, Eli Drinkwitz is my SEC Coach of the Year. Nothing against Saban and Kirby. They've both done awesome jobs. They're also playing with loaded decks. They both have had top 2 recruiting classes each of the last few years. For Eli to have lower recruiting classes, but to turn Brady Cook into a stud quarterback, to take Cody Schrader out of Truman State and lead the SEC in rushing. Luther Burden was kind of a, okay last year as a true freshman. He's an absolute stud as a sophomore. So I think Drinkwitz would get my vote for SEC Coach of the Year, but I understand people want to give it to Saban for the job he's done and all that. Yeah. But nonetheless, real quick on those lines, did you like Ole Miss minus the 10 or no?
So I was trying to look this up the entire time, and I apologize for being so distracted. But what I was going to say was the second half line for Ole Miss is like 3.5 versus Mississippi State. That's what I love because they look better, and I just think Mississippi State will fall away in the second half. But I would take Ole Miss to cover 10. I would probably just, if I'm actually betting on it, you're talking about a teaser situation for me, which is never good for a gambler, but I would also buy down and feel way more comfortable with like 9 and a hook for Ole Miss and then 6.5 for Mizzou.
Okay. All right. So you're playing it tight. All right. Two more real quick on this one. Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central, 12 Eastern on ABC. It is 6-5 Kentucky at number 10 Louisville. Louisville just a touchdown favorite. This one feels like to me Louisville wins big. I've been so disappointed in Devin Leary this year. Yeah. Ray Davis has been awesome, but he's really the only good thing Kentucky's had. And Mark Stoops, man, I don't know what's going on, but you're making $9 million a year. You got to win some of these close games, and they're on the verge of going 6-6.
We haven't had a Mark Stoops win this season. We haven't. We had like a big win. Like he got embarrassed by Bama. He got embarrassed by Georgia.
Florida was a good one.
There's nothing about Kentucky that makes you believe in them. But I will tell you this too. Louisville just went to a vacated premises, like an abandoned home, Home Alone 2, go stay at your aunt and uncle's in New York and make a booby-trapped house out of it. Like, that's what they were playing in Hard Rock Stadium at Miami. I think Kentucky, the 7 points, I think that they're going to somehow play good enough defense and get enough turnovers to win this game. Devin Leary has been very underwhelming and disappointing this season. I had him as the third best quarterback in the conference coming into the season because I thought like that he would pick up where he's kind of left off in the ACC. And there's been times where he will make throws that there are not a lot of other quarterbacks in this conference that they can make, and he makes them. But he just doesn't do anything with a lot of consistency besides his inconsistency. So I will take Kentucky to win. I just think this is the game they finally put everything together, and Mark Stoops gets like a little bit of like a Jimbo Fisher type win where it's like, oh my gosh, hey, 7-5 in an SEC East, and like, in a difficult year we had to play Bama. We'll ride that into next season.
Be huge. One more, this one on ESPN on Saturday morning. It is 7-4 Texas A&M with Elijah Robinson coaching for Jimbo Fisher at number 14 LSU.
Yeah.
LSU minus 11.5. They are all in on the Jaden Daniels for Heisman campaign. Going to be a tough test because A&M's defense is very good. That defensive front is one of the best in the country. And I don't know, an interesting game, but I think LSU is pedal to the metal. Yeah. They're going all in on trying to get Jaden Daniels the Heisman.
I hate this is an 11 o'clock game. That's such a this entire thing. I mean, how many touchdowns do you think they get him? First off,
at least I'd say he needs 3 passing, 2 rushing. Like I think he needs 5 to stay keep pace in the Heisman race.
550, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. Like he's gonna have 50 total touchdowns. Jaden Daniels is a top 2 player in the country for the Heisman. It should be him or Bo Nix, and I think that the conversation should probably stop and end there. I hate this whole idea of, oh my gosh, let's give it to whoever, what have you done for me lately? Like I tell you what, if Washington wins over Oregon in the Pac-12 championship and Georgia beats if Georgia or Bama somehow beats Georgia, Milroe might get invited, and Carson Beck might get invited, and Michael Penix will definitely be invited, and probably win it if they beat Oregon. Get Jaden Daniels 6 touchdowns for me. I think LSU wins this game. I think this is like we saw it last week, pedal to the metal, like full on, like full tilt. I think Brian Kelly has a point to prove, and this is a very vulnerable spot for A&M. You're starting to hear stuff about coming out of the transfer portal with like some of the star receivers and stuff. I think they're a very, very vulnerable spot. I would take LSU big.
And LSU has never lost to A&M in Baton Rouge since they've come to the conference. So, all right, one more segment with Marler coming up next. We will go rapid fire on the rest of the games in the SEC. That's coming your way in just a sec. I want to remind you guys this episode presented to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Look, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you need to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. They're going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I know some of you are doing seasonal hiring for the holidays. Some of you are just looking ahead to 2024 and bringing on some new team members. Go check out our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. They got simple tools like screening questions, going to make it easy for you to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you could quickly prioritize who you want to interview and then ultimately hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires against leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs, helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, one more segment with Chris Marler here on Locked On SEC. And Marler, we got to go, and we got to go quick. Shout out to our everydayers out there. Keep on checking us out each and every day. Let's dive into it. Saturday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern on SEC Network. Just a quick thought. It's 2-9 Vandy at number 21 Tennessee. Vols are 27-point favorites. I think Joe Milton, as disappointing as he's been this year, he doesn't even have to throw a pass. Just run the football, run that dominant ground game down Vandy's throat and get out with the victory.
I know they're going to Heupel needs to do something for the fans. And honestly, I think it's going to be a game where Joe Milton, they're going to put him in a lot of positions to succeed. I think that they will probably run it up on Vandy because they need a game to kind of get back to like a little bit more confidence and swag like they had coming into the season. I think that it'll look a lot like the game you're showing here on this picture right here against Virginia. And you'll see it, and it's his last game in an illustrious 11-year career. So I think that like they're going to want to send him out. If they had already put in Nico in any substantial amount of time, I would think that they wouldn't run it up, but I think they're going to run it up.
And Vandy, they're going to go 2-10. Clark Lee, you got to go, man. I like him. Yes, you got to go. James Franklin was winning 8-9 games there. It's doable.
He's the only one.
Clark Lee, you got to go, man. I got to go a different direction. 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. It's number 5 FSU at 5-6 Florida. FSU about a 6.5 point favorite. Battle of the backup quarterbacks. Graham Mertz goes down with an injury. He's done for the year. Max Brown likely to get the start. And then Henry Rowan Gardner for Florida State going to get in there. I don't know what the guy's name is, but something weird like that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's the same name as that kid from who broke his arm in Rookie of the Year. Gardenhosa. He's going to be coming in and playing quarterback for Florida State. It should be a lot of fun. I like Florida State to win. I do think it's a little bit interesting the fact that Florida is only a 7-point underdog, especially at home. This would be a massive, massive win to bookend the games that mattered most in the season. Like if they were able to beat Tennessee to start, that SEC play like they did earlier in the year in the Swamp, and then end it by beating an undefeated Florida State team, regardless of Jordan Travis being out, that would be a massive, massive stepping stone for Billy Napier, not only to get to a bowl game, but also to get into next season as the head coach, especially with how tough that schedule is going to be. I like Florida State. I don't think Florida's defense has been able to stop anybody. They're like 35 points a game like in SEC play, which has been not great. And the only other positive thing I think of Florida is they are going to have a little bit more of the read option stuff. And I would tell you the 35-point stat that I threw out and the read option thing I threw out, I didn't check to see if that's true, but my best friend from Columbia, South Carolina, George Simpson, told me that. And if he's wrong, you take it up with him.
All right, 60 seconds on these next two. 7:30 Eastern on ABC. It's number 1 Georgia at 6-5 Georgia Tech. Georgia around a 24-point favorite. Some clean, old-fashioned hate. Georgia rolls big, right?
Play this game in Atlanta every year, please. It makes it even more unfair when they play it in Athens. I'm old enough to remember when Georgia Tech won 3 of these games in a row against Georgia with Joe Hamilton at quarterback. That's how old I am. Yeah, this is a blowout. This is Kirby hates all of Georgia's rivals. I don't know if Tech is included or excluded in that. I do think that Tech will put up more points than they have in some of the past matchups, but I don't think it's a look-ahead spot for Georgia at all. I think Kirby's got them dialed in too focused for that. So maybe they're sluggish early, but that's not the only hope I would see for Georgia Tech.
It's 7:30 Eastern on SEC Network. Number 24 Clemson. They're back in the top 25 at 5-6 South Carolina. Win or go home time for Shane Beamer. You get a win, you're bowl eligible. They did it a year ago. Going to be tough to do it this time because Clemson seems to be clicking right now these last couple of weeks with some big wins over North Carolina and Notre Dame.
Yeah, but they got to go on the road now. They got to go on the road to Williams-Brice. And I just really – I hate that I'm saying it, but I'm fully bought in on Beamer and them closing the win and getting the bowl eligibility. It just seems like the kind of thing that he's able to do, right? Two of the least likable press conferences you're going to see, it may be in rivalry history between these two. But I will say that I think that Beamer and I think Spencer Rattler allowing only 14 points, which is not something they've done a lot of this year. South Carolina, I think they win.
It is. They should just put both guys at a podium and have Darude just play Sandstorm in the background. I think that would be
wild,
very, very entertaining. All right. Lastly, Marler, it is the Iron Bowl, 2:30 Central on CBS. Number 5 Alabama at 6-5 Auburn. Bama over a 2.5 touchdown favorite, 14.5. Look, a week ago, the talking points were, man, Auburn's peaking at the right time. They go and lose to New Mexico State. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden it's everybody's saying, well, Bama's going to roll. But it's still the Iron Bowl. It's still Jordan Hare. Weird things happen sometimes.
Yeah, they do sometimes. They do. You know what else? You know what other weird things happen in Jordan-Hare? You get beat by 3 touchdowns as a 25-point favorite against New Mexico State. I sat here last week on this show, on my show, on every show I was on, and said, hey, all this talk about Auburn, and everyone's saying like, oh my gosh, they're peaking at the right time. They're a dangerous team right now. Don't let Auburn get hot. Hugh Freeze going to be on a 4-game win streak going into the Iron Bowl. And then you got your blank handed to you by New Mexico State. And it wasn't like a situation where it's like, oh no, like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It wasn't like turnovers. It wasn't like they, like fumbled a punt or a kickoff inside their own 10 or 20-yard line. They got doubled up on yardage. They got doubled up on first downs, and they got their asses handed to them by New Mexico State. I will tell you, how old is this picture? Goodness. I will tell you this, that I don't think Bama does not beat them by more than points.
More than how many
money points? That this game is not by more than 21. By what New Mexico State beat Auburn by. I think it's much closer than that. I think if you're Auburn, the key to victory here, get a couple of plays like I mean, some requests where somebody loses contain and he gets in space and breaks a long run, or Peyton Thorne has like a big long run early like they did against Georgia. And maybe we even see shades of Gus Malzahn 2009 game where it's like, double reverse pass, an onside kick, and get up early. Like they are going to need to play the run game and then have that secondary, which is a very good secondary, make Jalen Milroe beat them. He's been really good, and they've made a really good second half adjustments. But most of Bama's big wins, despite being down early, have come on at home, not on the road. So, I mean, I tell you what, as much as I dog Auburn, I never bought into the fact they were peaking at the right time, because they what happened was they played the 3 worst teams in the conference that had a combined 2-19 record in the SEC. That being said, when the clock hits 0, that says like it's about to be kickoff, the countdown to kickoff in the stadium, when that clock hits 0, all 85,000 of those fans in that stadium are going to believe that they can beat Bama.
Yeah.
So I still like Bama. I think it's closer than people think. I'm going to say Bama 28-17.
I've got Auburn on a return missed field goal back for 6 points. So
you're the worst person I've ever met in my life.
He is Chris Marler of the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. Marler, always fun to chop it up, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good, brother. You have a great Thanksgiving.
All right, you too, man. That's Chris Marler there. Our buddy joins us every week to talk all things SEC football ahead of Rivalry Week. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Come on back tomorrow. We'll get you set for a little Thanksgiving edition of Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. Now for your second listen, go check out Locked On. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.